All right, welcome to the driver timeline chart installation guide and walkthrough. This is one of my favorite plugins. You can see it's already on the screen. It's building a chart right now as I'm just spectating this race at Atlanta. But let's get into the installation. So it's just like all the other plugins. First thing you're going to want to do is open up that zip file, extract it out. It's going to have a README file that you've probably already found, a plugin file, and a remote control component. So you're going to go into SDK, open up your settings, and scroll down to the overlay section, find the plugins, and open up that editor with the ellipses. Then you're going to click import, find that timeline plugin file, open it up. It's going to be sitting right here. We're going to come back to this in a minute to talk about settings, but let's go ahead and finish the installation. Next thing you're going to want to do is to load the remote control. Just like all the other plugins, you're going to be in your remote control panel, hit F2, then come down to where it says import from library, hit that arrow key, change it to import file, click import file, and find that timeline remote control component. Open that up, and it looks like this purple box right here. Got the standard hide and show, but this also has the pit stops assumptions. These are the same pit stop assumptions from the pit stops and I forget what the plugin package that gives you the pit stop information and stats. It's just a copy of that. It uses the same variables. So if you already have that, you don't need both of these, but they'll update each other if you change something. And while we're looking at this, let's go ahead and talk about the pit stop assumptions. So this works the same way as the pit stop stats does. You put in some numbers so that we can assume what happens on a pit stop, because iRacing doesn't give us that data. So for a NASCAR Cup car, these are the settings I use: 8 seconds, 12 seconds, and 18 seconds. So that means that any pit stop a driver makes that takes less than 8 seconds, the plugin is going to assume that that is a fuel-only stop. Then anything over 8 seconds, but below 12 seconds, it's going to assume is a 2-tire stop. Any stop over 12 seconds, but less than 18, it's going to assume is a 4-tire stop. And anything over 18 seconds is going to assume that the driver had an extended stop with repairs being made. And in the pit stops and stats plugin, this has to do with how it aggregates people, how long their repairs have been. It has to do with telling you how many tires a driver took on the last pit stop. In this plugin, what it does is it decides what the chart is going to label that lap. And hopefully, as this lap chart is generated on the spectating race, we'll get some pit stops so you can see what that looks like. So back to the rest of the installation. The next thing you're going to want to do, go to your style overrides, copy in the style overrides from the README file. They're pretty standard, as just like all the other ones, but you'll notice there is a font size here. It actually doesn't work, so don't worry about that. The font is set somewhere else in this plugin. And then you're going to want to go to your initial variable values and put in the line that automatically hides the plugin when you first open SDK. To do that, you go to that same overlay section, initial variable values, open that up, and then just add in that line, overlay.timeline display equals hide, so that it hides when you first open it. And then you're there. And then lastly, so I already have the chart formatted in the way that I find works best, especially on a 1080p broadcast. But if you're using 4K or 1440 or anything, you're probably going to want to tweak the chart size so that it's readable on screen for your viewers and for you. And the way you can do that, and you can also change the colors and everything, is actually in the plugin editor. So this chart is not an HTML element. This is not something that can be altered by CSS styling or style overrides. It's actually drawing this kind of pixel by pixel and creating an image. So we actually have to tell the plugin how to draw things like that. And if you open up the plugin editor in the timeline plugin, there's a section on the initialize tab called define chart size and formatting. And between these two kind of like lines of slashes is where all the options are that you might want to change. So you can set the basic width and height of the canvas, which is the chart. You can set the width of the lines, so that includes the axis lines, the chart connector line, the line going between the dots. You can change the text font size. You can change the size of the or the number of grid lines. It defaults to 5, which is what I've got it set here, which works pretty well. And it's just going to choose the 5 that most evenly split up the number of laps you have, or that have occurred already. And then you can set the dot sizes. So there's a green dot size. The green dot is a green flag lap on the chart. There's a caution dot size and a caution lap dot size. The caution dot size is going to be, it's a yellow. Well, you can set it, but it's going to be yellow and it's bigger. That means that's the lap that the caution actually occurred. And then all of the caution laps after that, until the green flag, will show up as small yellow dots. And so that's these two. So a caution lap is the smaller one, the way I have it set up, and the caution dot size is when the flag comes out. And then there is similar settings for the pit dot. So now we've had this driver, we're looking at make a pit stop there around lap 18, and you can see what that looks like. It's an orange dot. You can change that right here. There's a pit dot color if something else makes more sense to you. And then you can change the size of that pit dot too. If you change the font size, you're going to need to adjust at least this pit dot to make sure that that number or label fits in there. And again, the labels here in this example, it's a 4-tire stop. And again, this is based on those time assumptions we put in the remote control panel. So this was a stop between 12 and 18 seconds that occurred on lap 18. And so it's labeled with a 4. It could also be labeled with a 2 for a 2-tire stop, F for a fuel only, or R for repairs. And then the last options you have here are some padding. This is just kind of the space between the chart axes and the side of the canvas. If you change the fonts on the text, you probably need to adjust this padding to make sure nothing's on top of itself. And that's kind of what's going on here. I think the camera just chose a different driver, so you can see this driver actually had an extended stop on lap 18 under that caution and lost a number of positions. And there I've got the camera set on watch exciting or something like that, so it's jumping between drivers. And that's where you change the format. Like I said, I've got it set up for a 1080p stream in a decent size. It doesn't block the whole screen. You can watch a driver and take a peek at their chart at the same time. I also like to pull this up at the end of the race for interviews, so I can, think of something to ask this driver about. Why did they lose positions here? Why did they make that tire pit stop decision there? And how that, you can see how that played out for them and kind of tee them up for something like that. All right, and then the biggest kind of like asterisk on this plugin is that this chart actually builds its own data mart, so it doesn't rely on data coming directly from iRacing. iRacing tends to only give you the current lap in this level of detail and the most recent pit stop and things like that. So this actually builds its own library of lap and position to make these charts in the browser memory, which means that if you do anything that refreshes the browser source or refreshes the HUD or reloads the overlay, you will lose your existing data. So if I were to edit the plugin parameters that we just talked about, size and color, it's going to reset the plugin and lose all the data that we already have. If you change the style overrides, and that will refresh the browser or the HUD, that will erase the existing data. If you close SDK or something like that, you're going to lose the data you already have, and then it will start over and start logging the data from whenever it's last initialized. So if you have to do that, in a race, you're just going to lose that data, which isn't the end of the world if you have to do it in the first third or first half of the race, because you're still going to have that second half of the race narrative to rely on in an interview or in towards the end of the race. But this is kind of the biggest thing you have to remember, is if you do any of those things, you're going to lose this data. The same as that pit stop and stats plugin that uses the same pit stop assumptions to build a record of pit stops and what happened. So anyway, I hope you like this one. This is my favorite. This is the first plugin I ever made, actually, was this one. It's the most complex. I've spent the most time on it, getting it just right. I'd love to add more details. Like, I would love to be able to add incident points or off tracks. But again, iRacing doesn't tend to give you that information for drivers that aren't you. If you're an admin of a league, you can see some incident data, but I think most broadcasters aren't, so I haven't added that. The other thing I use this for is when I'm racing, I like to use SDK for my overlays for my stream, and then at the end of the race, like let's say I have a miraculous race and I come from behind at the last pit stop and win the race, I kind of get this graphical summary that I can post, send to my dad or post on social media and things to talk about the race. So that's pretty neat too. And I also mentioned that the chart does work for replay files. It's designed to work for a live race. It does work in replay files with two caveats. One being that caution flag data is not included in a replay file from iRacing, so the caution laps won't be labeled. There won't be any yellow dots in your chart if you generate this in a replay. The other thing is that the chart actually builds its data library at the end of each lap. So the chart won't be pre-populated when you open a replay file. You'll actually have to fast forward through the replay to get every lap logged and into that data library for the chart to rely on. And if you do that out of order, like let's say you jump around your replay, it is going to make the chart look a little wonky. Because like let's say you're watching lap 50 through 60 and then you jump back to the start of the race, the chart will have dots for lap 50 through 60, and then it'll start plotting dots for lap 1, and there'll be this big gap in the middle of the chart that isn't filled in. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, this is actually one of the easier installations in our plugin situation, but kind of one of the most complex plugins on the back end and things like that. But I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for watching.